The search lasted 3 days. Men in orange vests combed the banks of Hollow Creek with flashlights and hooks, their boots sinking into the mud like the land itself wanted to swallow them. Drones buzzed overhead, their red lights blinking through the fog, but none of them flew too close to the water. No one said why. They didn't have to. I followed them the first day, calling my mother's name until my throat burned. The creek answered instead, low, hollow sounds that echoed under the surface, like something knocking from the inside of a coffin. On the second night, the rain returned. It came suddenly, hammering the roofs and flooding the paths. The search was called off. For safety reasons. Though I noticed how relieved everyone looked when the sheriff gave the order. As if the storm itself had offered them an excuse to stop. That night, I dreamed of my mother standing in the rain. She was barefoot in the creek, her nightgown plastered to her skin, her hair floating around her face like dark weeds. Her mouth opened, but instead of words, water poured out. When she reached for me, her hands were wrong, too many fingers, bending the wrong way. I woke screaming. My father sat on the edge of my bed, pale and hollow-eyed. He hadn't slept since she vanished. None of us had. She'll come back, he whispered, though he didn't sound like he believed it. She always comes back. But something in his voice cracked on the word always. The third day, they found what was left. Not a body. Just her wedding ring. It lay on a flat stone near the creek's bend, polished clean as if carefully placed there. No scratches. No blood. The sheriff picked it up with gloved hands, his jaw tight. She must have slipped, he said. The current. No, said Mrs. Calder, one of the oldest women in town. She stood behind the tape, rain soaking into her black shawl. It don't take them like that. The sheriff shot her a warning look. That was when Uncle Caleb arrived. No one saw him drive in. One moment the road was empty, the next his black pickup sat at the edge of the clearing, engine idling softly. He stepped out into the rain without a coat, without flinching, as if the storm belonged to him. I recognized him immediately, though I hadn't seen him in years. He looked older than I remembered, taller somehow, thinner, his face carved with lines that seemed too deep for his age. His eyes were dark and watchful, reflecting the creek like twin pools of oil. The townspeople shifted uneasily when they saw him. Some crossed themselves. Others turned away. Uncle Caleb walked straight to my father and placed a hand on his shoulder. It's begun again, he said quietly. My father collapsed. That night, Uncle Caleb stayed with us. He moved through the house like he knew it better than we did, closing curtains, locking doors, sprinkling a thin line of gray powder along the window sills. When I asked what it was, he smiled faintly. Old remedies, he said. Family once? The rain didn't stop. It drummed on the roof until the sound seeped into my skull, steady and relentless, like a heartbeat. Somewhere near midnight, I heard footsteps outside, slow, wet steps circling the house. I froze in my bed. Then came the whisper. It sounded like my name, stretched thin, spoken through water. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound came from inside me, vibrating behind my eyes. I squeezed them shut and saw the creek again, moonlight rippling across its surface, shadows moving beneath. A knock echoed from the back door. Once. Twice. 3 times. My father stirred in the next room, mumbling my mother's name. Before he could get up, Uncle Caleb was there, blocking the hallway. Don't open it, he said calmly. But it's her, my father insisted, his voice breaking. I hear her. Uncle Caleb's expression hardened. That isn't your wife. The knocking turned into scratching. Long, slow drags of something sharp against wood. Uncle Caleb raised his voice, chanting words I didn't understand. The air grew thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. The scratching stopped. Silence fell, too sudden, too complete. Uncle Caleb turned to me. You hear them clearly, don't you? He asked. I nodded, shaking. He sighed, almost relieved. Then there's no more time. The next morning, my sister Eliza vanished. She'd gone down to the creek to look for frogs, ignoring Uncle Caleb's warnings. We found her shoes on the bank, neatly side by side. Her yellow raincoat was tangled in the reeds downstream, its hood filled with water like a drowned face. No body. Just absence. My father broke after that. He sat staring at the creek for hours, whispering apologies to something that wasn't there. On the fourth night, during another storm, he walked into the rain and didn't come back. Uncle Caleb didn't search for him. He made his choice, he said quietly. 2 weeks later, we left the house. Uncle Caleb took me up the hill, to his place overlooking Hollow Creek. As we drove away, I looked back at our home, dark, empty, already sagging like it was being pulled toward the water. "What's happening to us?" I asked. Uncle Caleb's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Our family," he said slowly, "was chosen a long time ago." The creek shimmered in the rearview mirror. And for just a moment, I could swear I saw my mother and sister standing together in the water, watching us leave, their mouths moving in perfect unison, whispering my name. Uncle Caleb's house stood higher than the others, perched on a hill of black rock and tangled roots, as if it had grown there rather than been built. The road leading to it narrowed into a single cracked lane, swallowed on both sides by pines so dense they strangled the daylight. Even before we reached the gate, I felt it, that pressure behind my eyes, the sensation of being observed by something old and patient. The house was not large, but it felt immense. Its windows were tall and narrow, set deep into the walls like watching eyes. Wind chimes hung from the porch, bones, I realized with a sick twist in my stomach, bleached clean and carved with symbols that seemed to crawl when I stared too long. "Don't touch those," Uncle Caleb said as he unlocked the door. "They listen better when they're left alone." Inside, the air smelled of damp earth, candle wax, and something coppery beneath it all. The floorboards creaked softly, not with age, but like cautious footsteps retreating under my weight. The walls were lined with shelves of old books and journals, their spines cracked, their titles rubbed away. Every surface bore a faint carving, circles, spirals, jagged lines that intersected like veins. Uncle Caleb closed the door and slid 3 iron bolts into place. "The house is warded," he said. "As long as you follow the rules, you'll be safe." "What rules?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Never go near the creek alone. Never invite anything inside, spoken or unspoken. And never ignore the whispers." That last one chilled me. The room he gave me faced the creek. I noticed it immediately, even before I set my bag down. Through the narrow window, I could see Hollow Creek winding through the trees below, its surface dark and restless even in daylight. Mist clung to it like breath. The sight made my stomach knot, but Uncle Caleb insisted. "You need to see it," he said. "It needs to see you." That night, the rain returned. It always did. I lay awake listening to it strike the roof, counting the seconds between thunderclaps. Somewhere in the house, wood knocked softly against wood, a steady rhythm that didn't match the wind. When the whispers began, they were faint at first, just fragments brushing the edge of hearing. "Come closer. Remember. We are waiting." I pulled the blankets over my head, heart pounding. Then I heard footsteps in my room. I froze, barely breathing. The floor creaked near the bed. The air grew cold, smelling of creek water and rot. Slowly, I lowered the blanket. No one was there. But the mirror across the room was fogged over, as if someone had breathed on it. Letters began to form in the condensation. "BLONG." I screamed. Uncle Caleb was there instantly, candle in hand, its flame burning blue instead of yellow. He muttered a chant and pressed his palm against the mirror. The glass cracked, the word distorting before vanishing completely. "You're stronger than I thought," he said softly. "They don't usually reach out so soon." "Who?" I whispered. He didn't answer. The next morning, Uncle Caleb began my lessons. They were never called that, but that's what they were. He taught me the old symbols first, how to draw them in chalk, salt, ash, and eventually blood. Each had a purpose, to bind, to bar, to remember. Memory is power, he told me. Hollow Creek feeds on what's forgotten. I learned the prayers next. They weren't spoken so much as shaped in the mouth, formed with breath and intention. Some made my tongue ache. Others tasted like iron. At night, he told me stories. About our family. About how long we'd lived near Hollow Creek. About how every generation lost someone to the water. About how those losses kept the rest alive. It's a balance, he said, staring into the fire. One that your mother tried to break. A knot tightened in my chest. She just wanted to protect us, I said. Uncle Caleb nodded. And that's why she failed. The whispers grew bolder after that. They followed me through the house, murmuring from behind walls, beneath floors, from the shelves of journals that sometimes fell open on their own. I heard my sister's laugh echo down the hallway late at night. I smelled my mother's perfume near the stairs. Once, during a storm, I saw them. Shadows moving outside the window. Tall, thin shapes that bent the wrong way, their edges blurring like smoke and water. They pressed against the glass, their faces almost forming, almost human. Uncle Caleb stood behind me, his reflection faint in the window. They're curious, he said. You can hear them better than anyone we've had in a long time. Why me? I asked. He rested a hand on my shoulder, heavy and cold. Because the blood remembers, he said. And yours remembers everything. I began finding wet footprints in the hallway. Small ones. Child-sized. They always led toward the basement door. When I asked Uncle Caleb about it, his jaw tightened. Some doors stay closed for a reason, he said. You'll understand soon enough. The town noticed the change in me. When Uncle Caleb took me into Hollow Creek for supplies, people stared openly now. Children cried when they saw me. After the footprints appeared, Uncle Caleb stopped pretending the house was only a shelter. It's a boundary, he told me one night as he reinforced the doors with iron nails etched in symbols I was finally beginning to recognize. And boundaries need guardians. The rain was relentless, soaking the hill until the ground felt soft and unstable beneath the house, as if the earth itself were slowly giving way. Hollow Creek below had swollen beyond its banks, its dark water licking at the trees like a tongue tasting the air. I could feel it now, constantly. A pressure in my chest. A pulling sensation behind my ribs. When I slept, my dreams slid effortlessly into the creek, as if my mind no longer knew the way back. That was when Uncle Caleb began bleeding. Not by accident. The first time, I found him in the kitchen at dawn, pressing a cloth to his palm. Blood dripped steadily into a bowl carved with spirals and eyes. You're hurt, I said. No, he replied calmly. I'm feeding the wards. He dipped his fingers into the bowl and traced symbols above the doorways, whispering apologies as he worked. Apologies to who? I asked. To what keeps worse things away. That night something answered. The whispers changed. They stopped murmuring nonsense and began forming sentences. We know you. We remember you. You left us alone. I heard them while brushing my teeth, while eating, while staring out at the creek. They echoed my own thoughts back to me, twisted and stretched until I wasn't sure which ones were mine anymore. Uncle Caleb watched me closely. They're testing the connection, he said. Seeing how deep it goes. I didn't ask how deep that was. The first shadow crossed the threshold on the 7th night. I woke to the sound of the wind chimes rattling violently. Not swaying, shaking. Bone clacked against bone in a frantic rhythm. The air in my room turned icy, my breath fogging in front of me. The shadow peeled itself away from the corner. It was tall, too tall, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. Its shape wavered, like it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be. When it moved, it didn't walk, it poured itself forward, dragging darkness behind it. Its face. It had my sister's eyes. I couldn't scream. The shadow tilted its head, studying me with something like affection. You hear us now, it whispered, its voice layered with many others. You don't pretend anymore. The door burst open. Uncle Caleb stormed in, chanting loudly, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. He threw a handful of ash that burned white-hot in the air, forcing the shadow back into the corner. It dissolved into the wall with a sound like water being sucked down a drain. The house groaned. Silence followed. Uncle Caleb leaned against the doorframe, breathing hard. "It crossed too soon," he muttered. "That shouldn't have happened yet." "What was that?" I asked, my voice shaking. He hesitated. "A messenger," he said finally. "One of the ones shaped from memory." I thought of Eliza's eyes. "You said the house was warded." "It is," he replied. "But wards weaken when the bloodline changes." That was the first time I realized something was wrong with him. He was thinner than when we arrived. His hands trembled when he thought I wasn't looking. Dark veins had begun to show at his temples, branching like cracks in porcelain. And sometimes, when he thought he was alone, he whispered back. I started sneaking into the attic. The journals called to me, not with sound, but with weight. Each time I climbed the narrow stairs, I felt like I was walking deeper into something alive. Dust hung thick in the air, undisturbed except for a single clear path to the far corner. That was where the newest journals were kept. My mother's. My father's. And one I didn't recognize, bound in skin that wasn't animal. I opened it. The writing inside wasn't entirely human. Letters bent and overlapped, crawling across the page like insects. But I could still understand it. It wasn't a record. It was a confession. Uncle Caleb had not come because the curse had begun again. He had come because it was failing. The rituals had grown weaker over generations. Too many family members had resisted. Too many had tried to escape Hollow Creek instead of honoring it. And now, the thing beneath the water, the listener, was starving. It needs a voice, the journal read. A living one. A willing one. My hands shook as I turned the page. I was chosen once, Caleb had written. But I ran. I hid behind my brother, behind his children. I let the creek take what it asked for, until it asked again. Footsteps creaked below. I slammed the journal shut, and shoved it back just as Uncle Caleb's voice echoed up the stairs. "You shouldn't be up there." I descended slowly, heart pounding. "You were supposed to protect us," I said, holding his gaze. "I am," he replied immediately. "You let them take my family." His jaw clenched. "They were already marked." The rain began to fall harder, thunder shaking the house. "I saw the journal," I said. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. "You don't understand," he said. "If the listener wakes fully, Hollow Creek won't just take one or two. It'll take everything. So you feed it." "Yes," he snapped. Then softer. "I contain it." That night, the creek overflowed. Water crept up the hill, soaking the ground beneath the house. The whispers rose into screams, and the shadows gathered outside, dozens of them now, pressing close, their faces forming and unforming, friends, neighbors, family. Uncle Caleb stood in the center of the house, carving symbols into his own arms, blood dripping onto the floor. "You have to help me," he said, eyes wild. "You're the only one who can hear it clearly enough." "Help you do what?" I asked. He looked at me, rainwater and blood mixing on his skin. "Finish what I couldn't." From below the floorboards, something answered. A deep, patient presence that filled my head with a single, unmistakable truth. The Savior was never meant to survive. And somewhere beneath Hollow Creek, something ancient shifted. Finally aware that I was ready to listen. The house began to sink before dawn. Not dramatically, not walls collapsing or floors splitting open, but subtly, like a tired body settling deeper into a grave. Every step felt heavier. Every breath tasted damp. The rain had not stopped for 3 days, and Hollow Creek had risen so high that it no longer looked like water flowing through land, but land dissolving into water. Uncle Caleb said this was the final stage. "The boundary is thinning," he explained, voice hoarse as he stitched a fresh cut on his forearm with black thread. "Once the house can no longer hold, the ritual must be completed." I sat across from him at the kitchen table, staring at the needle sliding through his skin as if it belonged to someone else. I had stopped flinching at blood. That realization frightened me more than anything else. "What ritual?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lit 6 candles and placed them in a circle around us. Their flames leaned inward, bending towards something unseen at the center. "The ritual of remembrance," he said finally. "It's what keeps the listener asleep." "You said it needed a life?" I said. "Yes." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. "Not just any life," he added. "A keeper." The whispers surged at the word. Keeper. Voice. Blood that stays. My ears rang as if I'd been struck. "I won't do it," I said, though my voice sounded far away. Uncle Caleb met my gaze, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked old. Not just aged, but worn down, hollowed out from the inside. "You already are," he said quietly. That night, the shadows came inside freely. No barriers stopped them now. They slid along the walls, pulled in corners, clung to the ceiling like stains that refused to be scrubbed away. Faces emerged, dozens of them, some I recognized, others I didn't. All of them watched me. One stepped forward. My mother. She looked almost right. Her hair was wet, her face pale, her eyes too dark. When she spoke, her voice carried the sound of running water beneath it. "You shouldn't have left," she said. "I didn't choose to," I replied, tears burning my eyes. She smiled sadly. "None of us did." The house shuddered. From beneath the floor came a low, resonant sound, like something enormous turning in its sleep. Uncle Caleb grabbed my arm. "It's waking," he said. "We have to go. Now." He led me down into the basement. I had avoided that door for weeks, but now it stood open, yawning like a mouth. The air below was thick and warm, humming with energy that made my skin prickle. Candles burned along the walls, their wax dripping upward instead of down. At the center of the basement floor was a circle carved directly into stone. And inside it, bones. Hundreds of them. Small ones. Large ones. Human ones. Some were arranged carefully. Others were broken, splintered, gnawed. My knees nearly gave out. "These are the ones who refused," Uncle Caleb said. "And the ones who tried to run." "You said you were protecting us," I whispered. "I am," he said fiercely. "This is what protection costs." The chanting began on its own. Not from Uncle Caleb's mouth, but from the walls, the bones, the shadows crowding the basement. The symbols carved into the stone glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the sound. Uncle Caleb stepped into the circle. "I was chosen once," he said, raising a ceremonial blade carved from blackened metal. "I failed. I passed the burden on to my brother. To his wife. To his children." My heart pounded. "So this is it?" I asked. "You sacrifice me?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "I sacrifice myself." The whispers screamed in protest. "No. Not him. Not again." He smiled sadly at me. "I was never meant to survive this long." Before I could stop him, he slit his throat. Blood poured onto the stone, soaking into the carvings, igniting them with blinding light. The chanting reached a deafening pitch. The house shook violently, dust and debris raining from the ceiling. For a moment, just a moment, I thought it was over. Then the blood stopped flowing. Uncle Caleb's body twitched. Slowly, impossibly, he stood back up. His eyes were gone, replaced by a darkness deeper than shadow, deeper than water. When he spoke, his voice was not his own. "Not enough." The listener rose. Not physically, not as a creature with limbs or form, but as a presence that filled the basement, the house, the hill, the creek. My vision blurred. My thoughts fragmented. I felt myself being pulled inward, stretched thin across something vast and ancient. "We need a voice that stays," it said inside my skull. "A bloodline that remembers forever." Uncle Caleb, what remained of him, collapsed into dust. The circle flared. And then, silence. I woke alone in the basement. The bones were gone. The circle was smooth stone. Above me, the house stood quiet and still. The rain had stopped. Hollow Creek had receded. The town would later say the curse was broken. They would say Uncle Caleb saved us all. They would be wrong. Because as I climbed the stairs, my reflection in the mirror smiled. Just a little too late. The town came back slowly. First the sheriff, then the men with trucks and clipboards, then the neighbors who pretended they hadn't crossed the street when they saw me before. They said Uncle Caleb was a hero. They said the storm had passed. They said Hollow Creek was safe again. They never asked where Uncle Caleb's body was. There was no funeral. There was nothing to bury. The house on the hill remained. So did I. I told them what they needed to hear, that the rituals ended with him, that the whispers were gone, that the shadows had retreated into the water. I spoke calmly, convincingly. The words came easily, as if someone else were placing them in my mouth. At night the truth returned. The house breathed. Not loudly, just enough to notice when everything else was still. The walls pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. Sometimes the floorboards shifted beneath my feet, guiding me toward the window that overlooked Hollow Creek. I no longer slept in my room. Sleep wasn't safe. When I closed my eyes, I stood in the creek. Not drowning, listening. The water parted around my legs, warm and heavy, whispering names I had never known but somehow remembered. Faces rose and sank beneath the surface, forming and dissolving, their mouths opening in gratitude and hunger. They weren't angry anymore. They were patient. The journals began writing themselves again. I tried to burn them once. The fire refused to take. The pages blackened but did not crumble, the words reappearing deeper, etched into the fibers like scars. So I read. And I wrote. I learned the full truth of the bloodline. There were never sacrifices. There were successions. The listener did not want death, it wanted continuity. A voice to interpret the world above the water. A mind to filter memory into meaning. A keeper to ensure the creek was never forgotten. Every generation had one. They didn't always survive long. Those who tried to destroy the role were erased entirely, names lost, faces forgotten, bones scattered and unmarked. The creek did not tolerate rejection. Uncle Caleb had not saved me. He had prepared me. The whispers no longer came from the walls. They came from inside my chest. When I breathed, the creek breathed with me. When I cut my hand by accident one afternoon, the wound healed instantly, but the water below darkened, rippling with pleasure. That night, I heard footsteps on the hill. I watched from the window as a man wandered too close to the creek's edge, drunk and unsteady, ignoring the warning signs posted after the storms. He slipped. He screamed. The creek rose to meet him. I didn't move. The next morning, his shoes were found neatly on the bank. The town called it an accident. I felt balance. Mrs. Calder came to see me a week later. She stood at the threshold, refusing to step inside. "It's you now, isn't it?" she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. She exhaled shakily. "Then keep it fed," she said. "And don't let it wake fully." She left without another word. I understood then why the elders had always known. Why they had never stopped the rituals. Why they looked relieved instead of horrified. Hollow Creek was a lock. And I was the key. Sometimes, late at night, I hear Uncle Caleb. Not his voice, what's left of it. "You're doing well," it whispers from the water. Better than I did. I stand at the creek's edge when it rains, letting the water soak my clothes, my skin, my thoughts. I speak the names it asks for. I listen when it remembers. I don't fight it anymore. Because I know the truth now. Hollow Creek doesn't take people. It keeps them. And one day, when my voice grows weak, when my blood runs thin, it will ask for another. Someone who hears the whispers clearly. Someone who doesn't run. Someone like you. So if you ever find yourself near Hollow Creek on a rainy night, If you hear your name spoken softly from the water, don't answer. Because it's already listening.